and welcome to my channel. My name is Ella Dunn. I am an English major and student journalist here at Lewis and Clark College. Today I am going to be reviewing a very popular book, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, published in 2023. I largely blame this book, along with the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, for the rise of romantasy as a genre. You'll hear my thoughts about that in a moment. For now, let's dive right into discussion. Despite it being her most popular, this was not Rebecca Yarros' first book. She published her first series called Flight and Glory starting in 2014, which I have not read, but from my understanding seemed to be romance as well, however set in the real world. Fourth Wing began, when it came out, to garner attention on BOOKTOK, which is a hashtag used on TikTok for, as you might assume, book-related videos. While it sounds tame at first, BOOKTOK has a reputation for popularizing books with adult themes, aka pretty graphic smut.
Through from a low angle with your face in it, winking with your tongue out and your feet in it.
Where's my drink?
What drink?
My drink? My Diet Dr. Kelp? Don't tell me you forgot my drink!
Fourth Wing is unfortunately no different, and is among others deemed BOOKTOK books. The most popular has been the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, aforementioned, by Sarah J. Maas, shortened online to ACOTAR. Fun fact, that was supposed to be turned into a TV show by Hulu and Disney, but it was dropped, but Disney still has the rights, so once those expire, Sarah J. Maas is looking to sign with another studio to create it. So if you're a fan of those books, definitely keep an eye out. So more smut authors have began promoting their books using the BOOKTOK hashtag and the BOOKTOK community to gain popularity. Basically using the platform's horniness to gain traction. I want to talk more about BOOKTOK in another video, but for now, Funky Frogbait just came out with a great and really entertaining video about BOOKTOK, so I will link that right there if I can. Okay, let's get to Yarros and Fourth Wing. So if you want to avoid spoilers, skip ahead to this timestamp, and with that. Fourth Wing is about Violet Sorrengail, whose war general mother leads the fight school in the nation's most prestigious war college called Basgiath. Teenagers from all over the kingdom, Navarre, will come to try their hand at the most coveted position, which is becoming a dragon rider, which is referred to mostly as just riders. But before they can, they have to go through several trials. So Violet, our main character, has spent her entire life training to be a scribe, like her father, but pretty last minute, before the trials begin, her mom forces her into trying to become a rider. With only her scribe training, Violet's body is hardly able to meet the physical demands of becoming a dragon rider. But nonetheless, she passes her first few trials, which is still surprising. Being the general's daughter puts a target on Violet's back in various ways. First, we meet this guy who's essentially like a schoolyard bully, except far more violent and just wants to kill her for some reason. Secondly, there's Xaden. I'm gonna put the spelling here because it's irritating. So some history here of the world. Essentially, years before the events of this book, there were two warring factions, the general Navarran citizens and the Tirish. There was a Tirish rebellion years earlier where they wanted to gain independence from the kingdom of Navarre, and they lost. And then a couple things happened. First of all, the survivors were marked on their skin in some way. Apparently it looks kind of like a tattoo, and their kids were marked as well. And then secondly, Violet's war general mother killed Fenrir Orson, which so happens to be Xaden's father. So he has a very valid reason for hating her, or at the very least hating her mother. I don't know if I condone hating people because their parents are bad. So it's a classic enemies to lovers situation, of course. Violet passes the first challenge and is assigned to a squadron under wing leader Xaden. So wing leader is like, I'm pretty sure one of the higher positions you can have within the school. You lead several squadrons, I think. I may be wrong about that actually, but I don't know if I want to go back and check. Xaden and Violet become unlikely friends, of course, though I wouldn't consider their secret lusting over each other friendly behavior. It's constant. Basically, she overhears a secret meeting between him and some other Tirish people, who are referred to as Marked Ones, talking about rebelling, in a way, if I remember correctly. For some reason, this leads him to begin teaching her how to spar, so she doesn't die in her first year at the college, which is like nice, but there's no logical reason for him to be doing that. Their relationship develops fairly quickly, which I'll discuss my thoughts on in detail later. The book follows Violet as she trains to become a writer and overcome the physical challenges that the position presents her with. Despite her physical weakness, which is how Yarros describes it, she is chosen by not one rare dragon, but two, even though Yarros specifically said that dragons tend not to choose weak writers, because dragons are tied to their writers, so like, if you choose a weak one, that puts you in jeopardy as a dragon. But nonetheless, the main character's syndrome is very strong. She's chosen by a large black dragon named Tairn, who's my favorite character because he's just a grumpy old man, and then a baby golden dragon named Andarna, I think. So basically the school staff fight over this because it's such a rare thing to happen, and it's so unheard of, but she's special, so she gets 2 dragons. The big thing here is that the dragons choose the writer, so really, no matter how they argue over it, they don't really have a choice. Oh, and did I forget to mention, Tairn, her dragon, is mated to Xaden's dragon. What are the chances? On top of that, mated dragons can't be apart from each other for very long, and riders can't be apart from their dragons for very long. So what does that mean? That means that Violet and Xaden are gonna have to spend a lot of time together. Wow. Incredible plot. So, Violet trains with the dragons, and time passes as she's preparing for the rest of the trials she has to face as part of her first year. I'm not going to go into detail on those because at least something has to be left up to your discovery, and also, they don't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Sue me. Anyways, some other cadets try to kill Violet in her sleep, like a group of like 6 people. And basically dragons have powers that they can kind of pass on to their rider. But yeah, Andarna uses her power to stop time, and then Xaden comes in and rescues her out of nowhere. Not only that, he kills the cadet that let all the other cadets into Violet's room. He kills her in front of the entire school. That's like the ultimate embarrassment. As I mentioned, dragons all have powers that the riders can learn to wield. Tairn has lightning powers, and Andarna is like still developing, but it seems like she has the power to manipulate time. So essentially, Violet is super OP at this point, which based on the rest of the book is very unsurprising, but still upsetting. Well, that said, she's not OP because she's not good at controlling the powers at all. So there's a bond between the 2 dragons because they're mated. There's also always a bond between rider and dragon. So of course, somehow, a mental bond forms between her and Xaden, because somehow that bridges that gap. Rider to dragon, dragon to dragon, dragon to rider, rider to rider, if that makes sense. So a mental bond forms between Violet and Xaden, which both parties use in nefarious ways. So yeah, their relationship continues to develop. Yarros includes various graphic sex scenes. Not super important, but a lot of people read the book for that, so there you have it. The end gets relatively political, which is kind of a breath of fresh air after all of that. Xaden finds out that Violet's childhood friend, Dane, has been using his dragon's power, which is seeing people's thoughts and memories, and all he has to do is like touch you lightly. So he was doing that with pretty like natural like shoulder touches or something with Violet to find out about Xaden's plans to rebel, I suppose. So he's a snitch, and he told the higher-ups. So for their final trial, all of the students are expected to battle each other using their dragons. However, Violet and Xaden's group is sent to an outpost super far away, where they are forced to fight Venons, which are like creatures of myth. They're basically people who have been overcome by using dark magic. They were mentioned a couple times throughout the book, but their existence has been denied consistently. But there are some myths that have continued to persevere, and they're true. Several people die. The book ends with Violet figuring out that her brother, who has been presumed dead for many years, is still alive and part of this rebellion force. Which means that Xaden has been hiding that from her. That's how the first book ends, and the second book, Iron Flame, begins. Now it's time for my thoughts. First of all, I'll say it blatantly, this book is overhyped. In my opinion, Violet and Xaden's relationship is essentially the centerpiece of this entire book. That is why people read it. That is the roman in romantasy. I think their relationship developed in a weird, quick, abnormal manner. I expected and even wanted some romance in this book. I think most fantasy books have a romantic subplot going on, though the difference between that and romantasy is that the romance takes a step forward. So, I expected it. However, somehow I didn't expect the full-blown smut scenes, and hearing people I know rave about the book, and people online, kind of makes me weirded out now. I personally love slow burn, and that is not what this was. So again, this is very much my own opinion and interpretation, and based on my own likes and dislikes. And I feel like it tried to be slow burn, but it instead felt like Xaden was just completely indifferent to Violet one moment, and then super in love with her the next. or not in love, at the very least just physically attracted to her. Which, that's what love is, isn't it? There were just so many relationships, obviously the most primary one as well, that could have developed far more naturally, and also scenes that might have been way less cringeworthy if they didn't sound like a teenager's horny musings.
And my heart simply stops. His voice is like rough velvet along my skin. And his eyes, glaring beige strokes over me, like he's memorizing every detail.
Unfortunately, those are just a few of the horrible phrases Yarros so kindly blessed us with. Thank you. Overall, the romance just felt boring. It went too quickly from 0 to 100, with that being towards the end, and crazy after just reading 350 pages? Secondly, I did not like the tone. It took on a very conversational vibe, which, okay, when I read adult fantasy, I expect it to not sound like a shitty YA book. And yet, because it was a first person, it was essentially a never-ending stream of terrible internal monologue. She also used words several times in the same paragraph, which, to be fair, an editor definitely should have caught that before it was published, but whatever. She said snickering several times on the same page, which was just irritating. She also used the word freaking, like in the exclamatory sense, which was just insane to see. It felt like Wattpad, but worse, actually. I had to reread that sentence because I could not believe that I had just read that in a fantasy book. Freaking, I reiterate. Honestly, I just didn't enjoy the general prose at all. Didn't find any artistry and, trying in it. There's definitely a skill involved in writing first person and writing effective first person narration. She did an okay job. It was just boring and repetitive. In terms of craft, this book was just overall unimpressive. My final big critique is a qualm I have not only with Yarros, but with many other modern fantasy authors. It is very much something that bothers me in particular, very much my own opinion, so if it doesn't bother you or it makes sense in your head, that is totally your own opinion and I get it. But when designing a fantasy world, the author has complete agency over what biases they choose to include. It's your world. It does not necessarily have to reflect the biases and conflicts of the world we actually live in. This said, fantasy authors still constantly build sexism into their books, which at this point I just don't understand anymore. You know, if dragons can exist and you can generate an entire kingdom of imaginary people from nothing at all, I don't see a reason why sexism has to exist in the world, unless it plays an actual role in the story. From what I understand, gender doesn't really play a role in whether you get admitted to the college or not. I mean, Violet's mother is the leader of the college and a war general. I just think it would have been so easy to omit "it was because she was a woman" phrases when it clearly doesn't matter for the most part. If you really want to include sexism, commit to it as being an actual conflict in the story and a challenge for your characters to overcome. Otherwise, it just becomes something you can call on when you have no other conflict to talk about, which is boring. Okay, I'm done complaining now, for the most part. And I have a few compliments to dish out to Yarros. First of all, the dragons. It has been a while since I've seen a dragon-centered, especially adult fantasy book, gain so much popularity. Maybe I haven't had my eye out, maybe it's a popular thing, but I haven't noticed it. Especially a book where they take on the kind of classic fantasy / Tolkienian definition of what dragons are, which is super smart, easily able to outwit humans, and just super cool. So that was awesome to see. I loved that the dragons had personalities of their own. Obviously we had Tairn, my favorite character, who was basically just a grumpy old man who was tired of Violet's shit. Me too. But yeah, the dragons were really cool. I loved that. I would also say that the world building was pretty good. It wasn't super creative. It definitely did feel a little bit like just a copy-paste fantasy kingdom type thing. However, Yarros definitely had the scaffolding necessary for a good fantasy world. There were a lot of crossovers to the real world, like the existence of the middle finger as an offensive gesture, that I just found like a little bit odd, because you don't see a lot of crossovers like that in fantasy. But yeah, I mean, she had pretty good political conflict, and the professional and educational course for becoming a writer or holding a military position made sense. So good job on that. That was awesome. Overall, was Fourth Wing overrated? 100%. Is it a total do not read? I wouldn't say so. It's a fun read, at the very least. I feel like I tore it to bits just because I was expecting something different based on the popularity it had. It is a very average book. If you are looking for something easy, romantic, that will take you out of the dullness of your modern life, I would pick this up. But if you're looking for incredible modern literature with great writing style and a Tolkienian-like fantasy feel, this isn't for you. So honestly, it depends on your preferred cup of tea. I will not be reading the second book. I tried to start it, got through maybe about 20 pages, and gave up. It just felt unnecessary. The conflict was already boring. But that said, if you did enjoy the first book, I'm no one to dissuade you from continuing the series. Yarros recently released the third book in the series, Onyx Storm. I can't really imagine what that book is about. I haven't done my research, obviously, but nonetheless, it is available at most retail bookstores, if you're interested. I originally gave the book 3 stars for the positive aspects that I mentioned enjoying. However, as I made the script for this video, I remembered everything I didn't like about it, so I actually bumped it down to 2 stars. Again, as I've mentioned before, I cannot wait until Goodreads adds a half-star option, because I'd say it probably rests more about a 2.5 than a 2. 2 is pretty harsh. Thank you so much for allowing me to complain for like 20 minutes. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment your thoughts. Feel free to argue with me. Feel free to hate on my points, but get the conversation going. I do plan to start posting more consistently, so watch out for that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and feel free to stay tuned for hopefully more positive reviews in the future. Thank you.